rays of the one light, do you need a guru? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Many people scoff at the idea of having a guru. Due to human nature generally, they make a virtue of their scoffing. I am responsible for what I do, they announce. Responsible for my mistakes as well as for my victories. What would I ever learn if I handed over my development to someone else? To depend on another for guidance would be an act of spiritual cowardice. It would be understandable for someone gifted with some trivial ability, for instance with words, to insist on doing his crossword puzzle himself without letting anyone else help him. But supposing, even in such trivial matters, he had no such gift, what virtue would there be in refusing to learn? For that matter, where would the gift itself come from? That which is a gift is not a native ability. Still, crossword puzzles are hardly an important challenge. What if a person wanted to do something daring, to climb a cliff, for instance, but refused to study the art of mountain climbing? He would climb at the risk of his life. And how much more is risked than physical life is a great adventure of the divine search, where the risk is to salvation itself. Where is the sacrifice in seeking guidance? Even a mountain guide wouldn't presume to one's climbing for one. His purpose would be only to help the neophyte to climb safely. To have a wise guru is not a sign of weakness, but of plain common sense. All the saints, aware as they are of the hazards of the adventure, agree on the importance of having a guide, a guru. And these are the heroes speaking, not cowards or spiritual weaklings. Jesus emphasized the importance of having a teacher by asking John to baptize him. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 3, we read of his coming to John. Thus, Jesus said to John, "It becometh us to fulfill all righteousness." In the Bhagavad Gita, the 4th chapter, Sri Krishna says, "Open thyself to those who have attained wisdom. They will be thy teachers. Ask questions of them, both verbally and mentally. Serve them faithfully and with devotion." How is a devotee to recognize one who has attained wisdom? The Bhagavad Gita gives us this inspiring description of the sage. By this sign is he known, being of equal grace to comrades, friends, change-comers, strangers, lovers, enemies, aliens, and kinsmen, loving all alike, evil or good. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind.
Welcome again to everyone, also those of you online. So I've read this particular theme many times, and I also heard Swami talk about it. Yes, there is the traditional examples that it would be absurd to climb a mountain without a guide. But what he says more, and what our teachings emphasize more, is that we're here in a world where of great delusion, where we don't know where we've come from, and we don't know where we're going. Maybe we have slight memories of any past, and I've tried to see, where am I going? But the Guru does answer those questions. So I thought it would be interesting this morning to talk more about not do we need a Guru, but having had one, what have I gained from it? Because I realized as I prepped for this that it's a big, long list. And as I was growing up, I found many, many unanswered questions, and I was really quite frustrated. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and when I would seek answers that seemed more meaningful, I hit dead ends. Like, I thought, well, can we really only have one life? And whether or not I happen to come upon the right dogma or come upon the right belief, and if I don't, that I may actually spend eternity, that I'm beyond being saved. But that's only one of the Christian churches. The whole Christian side of philosophy seemed to embrace this idea of one life. And so when I came across Yogananda's teachings and realized, and this is really profound to me, and I think it is probably to all of you, but and I'm going to read it rather than quote it, but he says, actually he's quoting the Bhagavad Gita, but he says, the indwelling self is ever changeless, imperishable, and without limitation. Only these fleshy garments can be destroyed. The self is not born, nor does it perish. Self-existent, it continues its existence forever. It is birthless, eternal, changeless, and ever the same. The self is not slain when the body dies. Weapons cannot cut the soul, fire cannot burn it, water cannot drown it, wind cannot wither it away. These are the teachings of the Gita, but they're also the teachings of a guru who knew this personally, experientially. He knew it to the very core of his building, of his being. It's incredible to think, was I really never born? And will I never die? And these are the messages that the Guru wants to awaken in us. The other thing is that it's easy to look at this world and think it's full of duality. And yes, there's beauty. And yes, I want success, and I want a good companion, and I want a nice place to live. And then we have this body. And yes, I want my body to be healthy, and I want to look good, and but it's all a delusion. The self that says, oh, I want this for this body, isn't the self that we're talking about here. And that's another incredible aspect of the Guru's teachings that never would have dawned on me, but that the ego is the soul's identification with the body. And so we're absolutely deluded from the very moment that the sperm and the ovum meet and our little body begins. Here comes the identification or the attachment with this particular body. The church teaches, and I've got into discussions with many theologians and priests, the church will teach that at the moment of conception is at the same time the soul comes into existence and the body begins its existence. That's absolutely, obviously, contrary to what I just read. The soul was never born, the soul will never die, the soul cannot be touched. What is the truth? What begins to awaken in us is that we are the this sense of self is the only permanent thing in existence. You will not die. You cannot burn. Everything in the cosmos, in the universe, has a beginning, a life, and a death. A galaxy, a sun, everything in creation is not eternal. It's just a movement of energy. And that was another mind-boggling thing when I read where Yogananda said, everything is from the consciousness of God. I grew up always wondering, well, what is spirit? I sort of understood it because they leave you enough room in the Bible and in the teachings to kind of understand what spirit is. But when Yogananda put the idea of cosmic consciousness or spatial consciousness, an ocean of consciousness, I am the wave, but I will become the ocean. I can experience the ocean. There's so many incredible things that you learn. We think, oh, well, do I really want to, I am the bubble, do I really want to become the sea? But the truth is that you never lose your sense of identification or identity. That was another thing that so surprised me about Yogananda's teachings, because I used to think, well, if I am this self and I become the ocean or the cosmic consciousness, and he said, you never lose the sense of I am. He also said, spirit individualized itself. It is its highest nature, the individualization of every one of us. And his universe is his lower nature. And I remember thinking, we're a greater manifestation of God than his whole universe, the individualization of each individual. To me, that was astounding. It sort of started to break barriers. I realized the more I studied, the more I meditated on the Guru's teachings, the more I realized I'm this shell, this delusion is breaking down. And it needs to, because we have to understand this isn't our true home. And luckily it isn't, but if you really analyze a dream, when you dream, you don't remember your past and you don't see a future. You're right in that present moment. And that's what it is with this life. It is a dream, and that's what the Master teaches. This is a dream, and you will wake up from it. But as long as we have identifications, and as long as we have desires for fulfillment and to continue, we'll cycle back through as many times as we want to. And it's not even a sin. I'm not saying it's even wrong. Swami once in Rome gave an amazing discourse where he said, it's intended that you have these experiences. It's intended that you visit and experience delusion or duality, and every part of it, until, as Yogananda said, you reach the state of what he called anguishing monotony, where you feel so deeply, I just don't want any more of this world. I want something, I know there's something deeper in me. I know there's something else trying to manifest. So, an example of that that's amusing to me, we used to always like to get Swami the newspaper. And he would read it, and he knew I liked it, so if I came in the house and somebody had already brought him the newspaper, he would hand it to me, and I would take it home, and I would read the news. Kirtani would do the crossword puzzle, speaking of crossword puzzles. And at one point, I remember he was older, but he was reading it, and he went like this. He just handed it to me, and he said, I'm so sick of this world. And you can feel that at times, but the message isn't to negate the world. We obviously are here for a reason. God wants us to have these experiences, but we also need to learn that this isn't me, that this isn't what it's about. This is a short little 80-year span, 80 if we're lucky, 90 if you're unlucky. No, I'm just kidding. But, but you have this little tiny window of time. And where were we before? And where are we going after? This is just like a dream. If you were to look at time in the scope of eternity, this is such a small little thing of the total amount of our experiences. And another thing the Guru taught me that kind of blew my mind is this just isn't my second or my third incarnation, possibly. We've had hundreds and thousands of incarnations. We have been and done everything you wanted to do, and you still can do anything and everything you want to do, because it is intended that is the experience. It's God playing with God until he wakes himself up. So when Master speaks that way, my first thought was, well, if God's playing with God, then when I realize myself, do I just disintegrate, go into nothingness? And that's a certain mistake that some Buddhist lines have made, is that they think nirvana means nothingness. But Master was very clear that this sense of self, even when you're seeing omnipresence, and he says that very specifically in his poem Samadhi, that all of this Guru-given meditation, all of our practice is not to awaken us, but to prepare us for the liberating shock of omnipresence. And then he goes on to tell these stories. He says, all of a sudden one time, my awareness, my consciousness flew out of my body through every pore. I could feel myself leaving my body. And there I was, and I was seeing this veil after veil of light energy, and I realized that God, or Spirit's essence, is light, that he, veil after veil, he produces these realms of light. And then Yogananda said, and it is the most blissful, incredible experience to have that experience of Spirit. And then he said, don't ever think that you've experienced or that is the ultimate ecstasy. He said, keep on going for eternity. Now this is, again, he helps us understand, what is my home in eternity? Keep on going for eternity, and Spirit will show you veil after veil, endless manifestations of its ever new bliss. So we can easily think here on this earth, it's dual, it's hate, there's love, there's hate, there's war, there's birth, there's death, there's every kind of drama you could think of. And it is true that Krishna said, get away from my ocean of suffering and delusion. But it is also true that we are here because we're intended to have these experiences until they're not fun anymore. But the truth is that it's not some kind of punishment. I heard a tape once where Yogananda said, God did not put you here to torture you. I mean, it was a powerful statement. He just, I left myself kind of shaking when he said it, so much power. He did not put you here to torture you. So here we have a guru who's saying, if you quiet the mind, if you go inside, if you start to open the window of your eye to what I am perceiving, you will see that this universe, this spatial consciousness, this spirit, this cosmic consciousness, whatever you want to call it, is an ocean of bliss. And out of this bliss, he is spinning his sun and his moons and his galaxies. He's created every layer down even to the microcosmic level of life. His Spirit, he manifests teeming with life, every kind of experience you could consider. But what Yogananda says is, because this is another thing that he, I think, surprised many scientists. He said, it is not enough to study the atom, you must become the atom. And then he described it, and he said, if you go into the atom, you'll find that there's this little tiny quiver. It's the first manifestation out of the still cosmic consciousness. It's a very involved to try to explain that there is a spirit that is without energy. Behind the energy realm of manifestation, there is a consciousness that permeates everything. That's the spirit that they talked about before Genesis, before spirit moved and God said, let there be light. There is cosmic consciousness. It is a still, eternal state of consciousness. Swami said, Anand, that's why it's so difficult to describe God, is because you can't even describe that kind of consciousness, because once it's out of manifestation or behind manifestation, we can describe things in energy that move, that form, that appear or dissolve, but when you have an eternal state of consciousness behind energy, we lack any kind of description, actually. And in fact, Yogananda said that's why the only name that you can give to spirit that doesn't limit it in any way is bliss. Everything else that you try to define it by actually limits it, because it's anything and everything. So you have this state of still eternal consciousness, this ocean of consciousness, and it moves. And it begins to manifest its creation. Now, when we create, we have the ability to use all the components that the earth supplies us. And this is a fun point that Swami used to make. The carpenter can use the tree to use it to build a table and to create a beautiful house or furniture. But spirit doesn't have anything except his own state of consciousness. But when he moves that state of consciousness, then light appears. Well, how do we, you and me, create? There's one way we create that isn't to do with energy, it doesn't to do with substance or material creation. It is a visualization or a dream. And that dream can be so real to you that you can, like Yogananda said, you can hit your dream head on a dream wall and it hurts. When I was a child, I used to have this reoccurring dream. I would be heading over this cliff in this old Model T kind of car, and I would be heading for the ground, and then I would find myself outside of the car watching the car crash, and every time I was shaking. It was such a kind of a fearful, anxious experience. But I had the dream over and over, and I remembered once when I woke up, I willed that I wanted that experience to not ever come back. Next time I'm sailing over the cliff in this car, and I remembered that I had willed, and I said, I'm going to stay in the car until it hits the ground. Sure enough, I hit the ground, the crash, the break, everything that you would expect that you would experience in the crash of a car. I crawled out of the car, started to crawl up this bank, and I woke up and I never had the dream again. It was so real to me that it got my heart beating. And dreams are real to us. There's just no doubt about it. Until you wake up, you're in the middle of a dream. And that's exactly what we're in right now. This life here on earth, it's just a little 80-year-old dream, or 60 or 40, or even that maybe you only have 10 years of the dream and you exit, or maybe you have 90 years. But it's just a dream, and the master also gives you exactly the exit out through the tunnel, which is why we do Kriya, toward the light. All of a sudden, he said it this way. I'm sorry for those who have heard this, because I've shared it before in this community, but he said, every one of us looks down at our lifeless body after we leave this body. We go, I was dreaming I was that body. Think about it. Your essence, the self, the part of you that says, I am, continues out this window, if you will, or this window. You look down and say, I was dreaming that I was this body. Start to realize it now. It's a dream. You don't need to take it so seriously. We need to work at moving through that tunnel for that exit, because if you're already familiar, this is the reason why Master said Kriya is one of the best, the most wonderful meditation techniques you'll ever experience, because if you practice, and that starts to open up to you, that tunnel, that light, you've already begun the process of that final exit when you die. And if you're already familiar with that, then you can actually concentrate on the light. Because this is a wonderful story, but this is the drawback if we don't practice it now when we're still in this body. He said what happens is you move toward the light, and instead of going to the light, you start to see a past life panoramic review. And Master said, so you start to say, oh, I wish I would have done that better. And oh, I wish I would have done that. Or in that particular situation, I didn't love well. Or in this particular situation, I was jealous, or I was mean, and it takes you away from being able to go into those more ecstatic experiences of light. And it isn't God who's saying no, it's because we have put into motion, we reap what we sow. Here's another, since I'm on the law of reap what we sow, here's another wonderful aspect of the Guru's teachings. He said, every action invites from the universe a reaction that corresponds exactly to the type and force of the deed. Not the deed, it's not the deed. It's not the action. It's what are you thinking when you do the deed. So the example I always give, again, forgive the community members because I've used it before, but I'm driving down the road, it's dusk, and somebody's walking on the road, I don't see it very well, I accidentally hit them and I killed them. And I'm heavy with, I killed them. Okay, I'm driving down the road, it's dusky, dark, I see this person, I know that person, and I hate that person, and I purposely swing in and kill that man. The law, the cosmic law and the civil law, treats both of those in individual experiences or circumstances differently. If it's a mistake, okay, it's a mistake. But what is the energy or the consciousness behind the deed? The deed in the second case was actually hate, and you will reap what you sow. Like another way that says in the Bible, he who lives by the sword shall die by the sword. I never knew any of these aspects of divine law before I met my guru. It's just so amazing how it begins to open up, and then to understand, understand this because it's very interesting. Yogananda came in 1920 and his life ended in 1952, his physical life. And in that time, and still 10 years after his death or more, the prevailing belief in science was that consciousness was developed by gray matter and neurons, and the magnetism produced by the firing of those neurons. That's sort of a newer one. I just read it from a doctor in Holland. He thinks that consciousness might be produced by the magnetism that comes from the firing of the neurons. It's just absolutely a wrong science, and it's had a hold on Western science for decades and decades, that somehow the only source or the only example of consciousness in existence was creature consciousness in the humans, in the dogs, and the animals. And then you have these Kriya masters, or this whole Eastern philosophy comes and says, no, spirit is actually consciousness, and everything is born from consciousness. Everything. And that means when you walk and you look at this building or you look at those trees, everything was first an idea in the mind, if you will, of spirit. It's so incredibly grand. Swami said once, it's so grand that most people can't wrap their mind around the fact that a conscious entity is spinning not only hundreds, but thousands and millions and billions of galaxies with suns and moons and who knows how much other forms of life. Yet, Swami said, he cares for each one of us individually, loves each one of us individually. That's just an incredible teaching, but like he said, it's so far beyond our human capacity to comprehend that we sort of had to put it on a shelf, and we slowly work at expanding our awareness, expanding our consciousness. But if you really realize it is an absolutely incredibly wonderful creation, and yes, we get our hurts, and my lover left me and broke my heart, and I got in a car accident, and I have cancer, and my mother dies, and all of the human, what Swami called the Pandora's box of human experiences. It's just a whole box of everything that we experience as humans. But that part of you, inside of you, that says, I am, that is a motionless, eternal, birthless entity, if you will, of consciousness. It is formless, it is breathless, it is changeless. It's almost in itself so hard to imagine, but Master said it this way: when I became one with spirit, I remembered it was me who spumed out of myself the nebulae, the stardust, the beginnings of the cosmos. And in fact, he says, I, or spirit, because he wasn't saying I, Yogananda, he was saying I, when I became one with spirit, remembered how spirit creates. He shares everything. Nothing is hidden from you because you are that. You are just simply an individualized part of an ocean of consciousness. So again, I want to emphasize this. I am the bubble, make me the sea. It doesn't mean that if I become the sea, I lose this sense of self. And what Yogananda said, and I've never heard any other teacher say it this way, and believe me, I've looked, I've studied. He says it, he hints at it in his poem, The Knower, Knowing, and Known as One. But what he said is that you, in that state of ecstatic union, if you will, you remember every incarnation you ever had. There is always this sense or the reference back that I am the one experiencing this. Yes, it was multiple incarnations, but still that sense of I am, not the sense of I am that I am this body and in this incarnation and I don't remember anything else. The sense of I am that I am everything. It is really, truly a teaching that is really almost beyond our comprehension. But if you trust that what he's telling us so far has merit, then we continue to practice, to go in. He said very, very plainly, if you get your consciousness into the spine and if you lift it, then and only then can the mind be absolutely calm. And once the mind is calm, the inner light spontaneously appears. And it's just a basic, real teaching of whether it's Christianity or Buddhism or Hinduism or yoga or anything, is We have to still the mind. The Bible says it, be still and know that I am God. Jesus said, if thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. It is that we have to realize the self. Here's another remarkable thing I learned from the Guru, is that it isn't actually that you ever merge. You never lose this sense of I. What you actually do is witness. He said, God, Spirit, manifests his dream of creation onto the screen of space. And you then, from that place, witness that. You don't actually absorb and lose yourself in it. You witness that as that state of spirit. It's a very particular thing to meditate on the sense of self. That's why Hong Sa is so incredibly powerful. It is true that even if you never knew of Kriya and you only meditated on I am, and you rested in between the pauses and just held that I am. And just between the pause, you feel that, and that pause becomes longer and longer, and the breath becomes less of a movement. And the more you enter into that, the more you enter into that state where you know the Father. As Jesus said, come through me to know the Father. Come through the light to know the Father. So we want to still the mind to know that light of spirit that Yogananda talked to. But he said, then you get to know that calm, still, eternal presence that is behind all physical manifestation. In fact, Sri Yukteswar, you've heard, some of you have heard me say this. Sri Yukteswar said, God is wait, I got to get it right. God is at home in his home of eternity, but he manifests the whole creation out of that. When the saint realizes his divinity, he has a similar twofold experience. You can enter into the light and ride these waves. And this is, so I'll finish with what I started with, explaining how, when Master said, it is not enough to study the atom, you must become the atom. He said, you go in there to where that little quiver happens, and it is that combined quiver of all the atoms throughout the universe that produces cosmic energy. But that quiver is actually the Om or the Amen. And that is the subtle energy, conscious energy of light and sound. It is the base of every atom. And Master said, when you hear that and see that, then your mind begins to expand, and your consciousness begins to expand to eternity. He could see the atom even. Nothing was hidden from him. He could see the atom. He knew each person's thoughts. He said once to Swami, and not in an egotistical way, I've always been moved. I'm glad that Swami shared it, and I'm glad that Master said it to Swami, because Swami was wrestling with some concept, something he didn't understand, and Master got up and came forward to him and said, you have no idea of my consciousness. But he didn't say it out of ego. He wanted Swami to understand it's much, much more than you're going to get with your human mind. And so don't be discouraged by what I'm hoping that you're encouraged by what I'm telling you, that we have the tools and we have the process. Life will come and go. We're going to have climatic extremes. We could see financial ruin. We could see everything stays the same. Doesn't matter what happens in the world, if you continue every day with that search, with that work of quieting the mind, focusing the mind, going into that tunnel, and pretty soon you realize, you're starting to feel, oh, I feel when I'm in nature, for example, you feel almost that God's breathing with you. You feel the life in the leaves. You feel the life in the ground. Look at Master's description of an experience in cosmic consciousness. He felt the earth. He felt it as, he could see the plasma. He could see through this world of seeming matter and could perceive the light of spirit. And that's what the Guru gives us. If we open up to that message, if we just do, he said, even if you do 25% of what I'm telling you, do 100% of what he's telling you. Do your very best. Be thoughtful and courteous to each other. Love each other. Because until we get the aspect of unconditional love, every time we put a condition on our love and say, I love you, but I don't like this, or it's just a delusion, and everybody's equally deluded. So instead of coming against those people, let it be. Just let the world go its way. You do your very best. You do your very best to go inside and to grow and to become, literally, a child of the light. We are children of the light, and that is the Master's teachings. And we're very fortunate to have these gurus and these teachings. Oh, God bless you all.